performance that they're putting up, and then you ask yourself, the same players, what actually changed? At the end of the day, you talk about the coach.
Solskjaer had not won any cup, since he left Manchester United. As a coach, he hasn't won anything. I'm not even sure why they considered him in the first place.
I'm sure you guys will have a great outing some other time.
Oh, I'm sure we wouldn't. And I hope, and this is, it might be, a sad thing to say, but I looked through the comments at Manchester United Instagram page, and 95% of the people were saying the same thing. Ole out. He needs to go. He doesn't in any way give the players what they need or give the team what it needs to be a trophy winning side. They are simply just playing football and hoping that somehow, some way they get to scramble in a goal. Look at their gameplay. It's boring. There's nothing there.
And then to think that you're playing with a team like, Liverpool, you should do better.
We wouldn't be able to beat Canopilas comfortably.
That's enough.
I'm being honest with you. That's the way the Manchester United is currently playing. We will not beat Enugu Rangers comfortably. We will maybe be able to get a 2-1 victory over Enugu Rangers or Canopilas the way that we're playing, and maybe it will be Ronaldo that will score the winning goal in the 90th minute, and then we'll celebrate for a couple of days. But it's very, very sad. I hope. Right now, Conte is free, Zidane is free. If they don't take advantage of this now and they continue to use Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, we will end up finishing 13th or 14th this season. And Manchester United may not even get into Europa next season. And then Pogba will leave, and then Ronaldo will leave. And
Ronaldo would not leave anytime soon.
Anyway, we need to go. Thanks a lot for starting up our Monday with us. We'll take a short...
Nigeria's Niger Delta region, from where the black gold fuels Africa's largest economy, where the lines between wealth and poverty has never been thinner. Conflicts, poverty, insecurity, and environmental challenges daily confront the region. How can the Niger Delta story be changed for the better?
Join Mamude Akuga at 9 p.m. every Friday evening on PlusTvAfrica as he probes deep in search of solutions.
Inside the Niger Delta with Mamude Akuga, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
Hello and welcome. It's Nimasa This Week, the voice of maritime. Nimasa This Week is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Statutorily mandated to ensure that there is regulation and promotion of matters affecting our waters. NIMASA bears responsibility for search and rescue, shipping development, and ship registration.
NIMASA This Week, the voice of maritime, showing on this channel.
Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Welcome to your favorite program, The Moment of Truth, brought to you by the Citadel Global Community Church. Our God is a God of salvation, far above all principality and power and might and...
Sundays, 7 p.m. on PlusTvAfrica.
Welcome back to The Breakfast on PlusTvAfrica. We're about to check out the front pages of our national dailies as usual and bring you up with speed to what's going on across board. And I'd like to start off with the Daily Trust newspaper. Now, hopefully we're able to connect with and ransom via phones. It's a bold caption on page 3 of the Daily Trust newspaper. You also have riders, why it isn't working. Experts to Saudi Arabia. Buhari leads Nigeria's delegation to Saudi Arabia's investment summit. That's on page 52. And 780 million naira fraud. EFCC grills ex-Senate President Ayim. That's also on page 5 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Gunmen attacked Ogun Church, abduct 3 worshippers. Gunmen attack Ogun Church, abduct 3 worshippers. Another caption, and just before we move away from the daily caption on page
2023 presidency, why Tinubu won't back Osinbajo if it drops out of race. Yahya Bello can never be APC presidential candidate, says Shagay. Federal government vows to recapture all inmates who escaped in Oyo jail attack. Also, court case, convention not meant to truncate anyone's mandate, says the PDP. Urges members and supporters to ignore distractions. Defeats APC in rescheduled Zango-Kataf local government election in Kaduna. Lagos Airport COVID-19 scandal. Staff whose account travelers used to pay PCR test fee into suspended. In 2023, APC leaders reject calls for Tinubu to succeed Buhari. Also on the Daily Independent, federal government draws flags for planning to spend 5.1 billion naira on Katsina Airport.
Edge. 73% debt servicing puts Nigeria's economy on edge. That's on page 4. How we're closing electricity metering gap. That's what the federal government is quoted to say. You find details on page 7. Ganduje offers blind teacher automatic job. That's on page 8. Rivers not fighting federal government over VAT collection. The governor of Rivers State, Wike, is quoted on that. Security operatives rearrest 446 Oyo prison inmates. It's on page 12 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. President Muhammadu Buhari leaves for Saudi Arabia Investment Summit. That might just be dominating all of the papers this morning. That's on page 4 of the Leadership newspaper. And you also have, let's see if we can take this one. Unfortunately, not so clear. I'll let that slide. All right, that's the much we can take on the Leadership newspaper this morning.
All right, now let's move to the Punch. SIM NIN linkage. Subscribers push for 2-month extension as deadline expires on Sunday. Subscriber group says registration centers extremely crowded. Fresh extension likely after NIMC and NCC review, says Telcom firms. Also, Otedola shareholders analysts project a spike in FBN share price. Aviation agencies plan 436.6 billion naira revenue, budget 55.86 billion naira for security. INEC needs 17,618 workers to conduct APC and PDP primaries. And also, World Bank blacklists 18 Nigerian firms and individuals for corruption. Still on the Punch this morning, ASU cautions federal government on 30 billion naira revitalization fund. October 31st deadline nears. We can also find this morning, NDLEA seizes UK, Malaysia-bound drugs, owners arrested in Lagos. Gunmen demand 6 million naira for 3 kidnapped Ogun worshippers. And Odwa, EFCC detains AIM over 780 million naira aviation ministry fraud fund. Army detains soldier for assaulting Kwara nurses during wife's delivery. And Buhari jets off to Saudi for investment summit today. Finally, Amotekun deploys personnel in boundary communities. 13 fleeing Oyo inmates arrested. Good morning to Femi Lawson. Thanks for joining us on The Breakfast.
Good morning.
All right, I want us to start with the president going to Saudi Arabia for an investment summit. For some reason, there's some, criticism. And of course, people saying, that they're not sure what exactly or why. So quickly share, if some of these trips are still, of course, very important to Nigeria and, our economy.
Yes, the truth is that we cannot, underestimate the importance of foreign relations as far as our economic development and even socio-political development as the country is concerned. Why people seem to be agitated sometimes when the president is embarking on some of these trips is basically because of the anger occasioned by the rising inflation in the country and the inability of the government seemingly to address the prevailing economic challenges in the country. But if you look at it critically, there is nothing wrong in the president embarking on such bilateral, moves to further push forward the economic prospect of the country, especially when such trips are centered around economically at home. These are not all right. People agree that that is most times what is responsible for some expression of grievances on the part of Nigerians.
Okay, let's check out the Daily Trust newspaper this morning and share your thoughts on this one. It says, despite SIM and NIN linkage, kidnappers, bandits still demand ransom via phones. So it feels like, that particular effort, the SIM linkage and the NIN registration has not yielded any result. What could be responsible? Let's share your thoughts.
Well, you see, the war on terrorism and insecurity, we have often said it, is not a war of might, but a war of intelligence. Despite every effort by the government to take military action, to impose sanctions, such as registration of SIM, NIN, and the like, the truth is that, can we say that this country has been able to make any considerable progress in terms of fighting insurgency and all sorts of terrorism in the country? The truth is that the country has not been able to do enough, because when we are investing more in hardware, in military infrastructure, in projects like NIN linkages, how much more is the country investing in intelligence gathering, in the war of intelligence, as far as the fight against terrorism is concerned? The truth is that there has not been any major achievement other than some of those military actions and successes in the war against insurgency. Today, people are still being kidnapped. Ransoms are being demanded, not only even in the northwest where telecom has been shut down, or there's a massive deployment of technology. What do you call it? The truth is that even down south here, people are kidnapped almost on a daily basis. Only a few days ago, like you just reported now, worshippers were kidnapped in the premises of their church, and kidnappers are now demanding ransom using the same tool of telecommunication. They are not writing letters. It tells you that it has not made as much as positive impact like the minister wanted us to believe at that point. So I think more has to be done by the country in investing on intelligence gathering rather than the other fire brigade approach of thinking it is by shutting down telecom, linking NIN, and imposing fiscal sanctions that will curb terrorism.
Yeah, but I mean, Femi Lawson, I'm sure that this was, the expected turnout. So it shouldn't be shocking to anyone that it hasn't achieved much with regards to security. And pretty much the same thing with shutting down telecom services in certain areas in Zamfara and Katsina and all those places. From what reports are saying, those things haven't achieved much. So why do you think we keep having these same knee-jerk reactions every now and then to seemingly, play along and look like there's action going on and achieve nothing?
Well, the truth is that, every policy of they call like military fears. The minister just wakes up tomorrow and says, no, as from tomorrow you must begin to register your SIM with your NIN. The government that does not engage citizens, there's nowhere where the minister or the president can be seen to have, engaged the media, the civil society, the religious organization, to mobilize them ahead of this policy. You can't, it is not enough to just wake up and decree a policy as if you are in a military, era, and expect cooperation as much as needed on the part of the citizens. What you are seeing is the fact that the citizens are not enthusiastic about supporting government efforts, even though in the overall interest, we have one or two other things to benefit. Because I am convinced that the more we can do on, getting the identity of mobile phone users or national identity of our citizens is very important. But such policies must be people-centered. such policies are easier when it is driven with the cooperation of the citizens. But the way this government and the operatives have been, embarking on these policies, they act oftentimes as if they are dictating to school children. They act as oftentimes as if they are the boss, and we are the employees. Whereas they are the employees of the Nigerian people. So they must always give that honor and respect. So the people who are taking or who are embarking on any policy, without that, you continue to see sabotage, and all these kind of, consequences that have trained the SIM, NIN, major, and other issues around intelligence gathering in the war against insurgency in the country. It is very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, and apologies for dragging on for so long with this one, but I think it's an important conversation, in looking at the bigger picture, because we are 6 years down the line with the current government. We've seen numerous, a couple of these policies every now and then. Every month there's a new law, a new policy by either the CBN or the Minister of Digital Economy. Many of these policies have come up in the last 6 years, but Femi Lawson, would you say that we've achieved much in the last 6 years as a nation? And what would this then tell you of the ideas that have come with this government with regards moving Nigeria forward?
Well, you see, we can continue to assume, especially when operatives of the government roll out statistics that are not backed by any physical reality on the basis of what the government has been able to achieve. The truth is that you look at what were the cardinal promises of the government when coming on board in 2015. President Buhari came on the premise of anti-corruption, security, and economy. And we, in all fairness, see that our country is more secured than it was in 2015. And we sincerely say that the war against corruption has been worth a reasonable extent when you look at the caliber of corrupt individuals and practices that are currently taking place under this government. Can we say that our economy has improved more than it was in 2015? So when people begin to give pass marks and assess themselves as having made any progress in the last 6 years, I am not one of those who want to easily agree. Good, we cannot but agree that there are certain areas that the government has been able to make progress, especially when you look at the intervention in some of our critical infrastructure, like rail lines and some other critical infrastructures, which the administration of President Buhari has been able to take to another level. But the truth is that, if you look at some more fundamental issues, such as the economy, the security, and the anti-corruption, the government cannot call itself fast. The truth is that if we have not really gone backward beyond 2050, we have not really made any considerable progress.
All right, let's also look at another headline and see if we can share your thoughts on this one. Still on the Daily Trust newspaper, 33 states may not pay salaries as 172 billion naira deduction grounds revenue disbursement. What do you make of this, especially at the time where states are expected to be self-sufficient?
There is no way states can be self-sufficient under a feeding-bottle democracy that we are currently operating. We have continued, to discuss this, even on your platform here, that if we get a point, now we are at the point of borrowing money to pay salaries and all sorts of ridiculous expenses to service the lifestyle of our politicians and the like. But it may get to a point where there may even be nothing to borrow again if something fundamental is not done. It is unheard of that a country so endowed like that, and our state as endowed in both human and natural resources, And now at the point of not being able to pay ordinary salaries. Salaries should be the least of responsibilities of any serious state. You have critical infrastructure, we have healthcare, you have, all sort of priorities that this state must embark upon. But today, salary has become a major issue, becoming the most to get allocations to run their state. What will it cost us to really go back to the part of true federalism that empowers our state, to explore their natural and mineral resources, to explore their own potential, and begin to be economically prosperous? When you have states that are so endowed, but are not viable enough to even pay salaries, then you should know that something is wrong. So beyond all this rhetoric, beyond all this lamentation, by the federal government at this stage, I think they should sit down and sincerely look for a way out of this culture of waiting for allocations to be shared at the end of every 30 days. It is ridiculous.
All right. On the Daily Independent, there's something here that says 2023 presidency, why Tinubu won't back Osinbajo if he drops out of race. And it also says, Bello can never be APC presidential candidate. Quickly share your views on the Tinubu backing the vice president if it gets to that.
Whoever will become the candidate of the APC for the 2023 presidential election will ultimately be decided by the party through its candidate. But the truth is that, in politics, can really not predict what can happen in the next minute. The truth is that it is within the right, even constitutionally, of President Osinbajo to think, if he so desires to contest for the presidential, even though it has been made known, likewise Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. But considering the political relationship between the two and how far they have come, as father and son politically, as they usually say, I think that will not be too difficult. And it will not necessarily be subject to the division of outsiders, especially those outside the Bola Tinubu political family, who is going to fly the ticket of the party among the two of them. If they so decide to go into the race together, I don't think it will be too difficult, considering where they are, how far they have come together, and the fact that both men have the right, even though one may be competent more than the other, but both men have the right to vie for the position. I think the machinery of their political family is strong enough to the extent that has been able to produce somebody like President Osinbajo as the vice president. So determining who runs among the two of them, I don't think will be subject to the assumption of most of us who are outsiders or those who are not even from their political family.
All right, let's quickly check out the leadership newspaper this morning. There's a caption that's quite interesting. 73% debt servicing puts Nigeria's economy on edge. 73% debt servicing puts Nigeria's economy on edge. Let's share your thoughts on this.
It's a worrisome trend, and it is the peak, of what we expect as a misfortune to the economic process of the country and our capacity to develop other areas that are critical to nation's development. Every year, we build our budget on external borrowing, then we return subsequent years to use our earnings to service this borrowing at such an alarming rate. This should really give us serious concerns of Nigeria. I have seen a lot of people try to justify the fact that the country is viable, they are credit worthy, this and that. But the truth is that for how long shall we continue to use a greater percentage of our annual spending to service debt? Many of these debts today cannot be traced to any fundamental development as far as the nation is concerned, other than what we have used to service the lifestyle of individuals and the political elite. So we should really be concerned about what the future holds, particularly for the younger generation, who these days are not going to be left behind for. This should call for serious concern, and it should call for an urgent review, of our policies, especially how much more we have to continue to borrow to service our annual budget. It's unfortunate and unfair.
Okay, and of course, I think we can just wrap up with the conversation on the primaries and INEC's preparedness for the elections also in Anambra. It says on the Punch, INEC needs 17,618 workers to conduct APC and PDP primaries. So share your views on that one, and also talk about the preparations for the Anambra State governorship elections.
INEC under Professor Mahmoud Yakub has been doing a lot, has made a lot of tremendous progress, and it has continued to show commitment to ensuring, that the institution of democracy is further strengthened. And I think the National Assembly and the federal government, as the case may be, should give all the needed support to INEC so as to develop its capacity to conduct credible elections in Nigeria. If you look at, the initiatives of the Commission over the recent past, especially those aimed at improving the credibility of our elections, you will come to realize that it needs all the support we may give as a country. And going to Anambra is going to be a very important election, not just to the political party, but to us as Nigerians, especially when you look at the security threat around this election that is just few days away. So we must be interested as Nigerians, and we must continue to prevail on actors to ensure that peace is allowed during this election. Because if Anambra election fails on the ground of security, or insecurity rather, it is going to be a major step for future elections, particularly the general election in Nigeria, especially when you look at the issues of insurgency, insecurity, almost in every part of the country. So determining election in Anambra and having a peaceful election is very important, and all stakeholders, especially the political actors, must work towards ensuring that Anambra election is peaceful, INEC is allowed to do its job, and people are allowed to freely choose the next governor of the state without any fear and intimidation.
All right, and I think we can wrap up this morning. Femi Lawson, thank you very much for kicking off our Monday morning for us. We wish you a very interesting week ahead.
Yes.
All right. Good morning once again. A little bit of history coming up next. We'll be telling you about something that happened in the year 2009 in Baghdad, a bombing that led to, of course, more than 100 people dead. Talk about it when we come back. welcome back to the Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. Now, a little bit of history. Let's go back to 2009 and tell you of a very sad day in Iraq. On this day, a bomb went off in Baghdad that led to the loss of 155 people and wounded at least 721. The 25th of October 2009 bombings were, of course, some of the worst that Iraq has ever experienced. The attack was caused by 2 suicide car bombs and targeted the Ministry of Justice and the Baghdad Provincial Council building in a quick succession at 10:30 a.m. local time. Among the dead were 35 employees of the Ministry of Justice and at least 25 members of the Baghdad Provincial Council. Also, a bus carrying children from a daycare next to the Justice Ministry was also hit, killing the driver and 24 children on board, as well as wounding 6 other children. It was, of course, on record the most deadly terror attack in Iraq since August 2007.
Very, 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 very sad. But up until this moment, we're still talking about, the bombs and killings and terror attacks across the entire country. I'm hoping that, the world, I'm hoping that we're able to conquer, all of this fight. It feels like it's almost impossible.
I don't think I will. I don't know. I'm not sure, if it's going to...
It's never going to end, but I'm thinking, because, the chase, talking about perfection, talking about absolute peace, talking about living in a world, living in a society where we wouldn't have terrorists and, terror attacks and kidnappings and killings. I mean, it's an illusion, but we're saying it should be reduced to, barest minimum.
Well, like you said, it's an illusion, and the possibilities. I mean, you're saying it should be reduced. Almost sounds rather like some people will die, but at least not so many.
It shouldn't be very frequent. Once in a while, I
think there's other things that need to be understood about certain countries that have continued to have these experiences for decades now. Iraq and Afghanistan mostly. We've also seen it, of course, over time spread into countries here in Africa, and I'm talking terror. But there's other things that I believe need to be understood about why it has seemed to be very, very difficult to end these things. The political aspects of it, that of course the corruption aspect of it also, which have been underlying factors. And I will say underlying, but if we look critically at it, they might be actually the biggest reasons why these things haven't ended. It's not necessarily really because of Islamic or religious fundamentalism. It really might be a lot more about politics and corruption. And if you have these things continue to play out, in these places, it really makes it harder every single time to completely flush out these fundamentalists and these terrorists, sadly.
That's actually true, because for as long as you have humans, of course, the underlying interest would always be selfishness. Humans would always think in their own direction. And that's why constantly you should ask yourself, how did this group of persons have the arms that they use, in perpetuating all of this evil? The question is, you have a group of persons whose business, at some point you would say that war is beneficial. Some people are profiting from all of this crime and criminalities that's ongoing. So that's why I'm saying that it's really going to be, an illusion at the end of the day, but really we can actually reduce it. So it boils down to, some consciousness, some human angle, the mind and all of that.
Absolutely. But of course, still shocking. Remember what we shared earlier, 155 people died on this day in 2009 in Baghdad. 721 were injured, and this includes dozens of school children and government officials in Baghdad on this day. Really, really sad and shocking figures. We'll take a short break. When we come back, our first major conversation for today. The Economist has put out a report on the Nigerian army. And of course, the Nigerian army, in response, is not very happy about it. They say it is set up to defame President Muhammadu Buhari. We'll talk about that after this break.
Politics has helped shape the decision of the polity, from conspiracy theories to good old-fashioned comic politics.
These are the results of tomorrow's election. Okay, you have it already, have you?
I am not hungry. If I need appointment, all I need to do is to start praising government.
Plus, politics will fill the polls of the country, from friends to frenemies, even strange bedfellows, to clones and stooges. We go beyond the rhetorics and the drama to analyze the story behind the story.
Let anybody come and say. The moment we stop having charlatans occupy political offices, we will curtail hate speech.
Plus Politics, not just another political show. It's about putting you, the citizens, in the know.
Businesses in Africa can be very challenging. In Nigeria, it is particularly intimidating, and successful builders have learned how to navigate a hostile environment to unlock opportunities. But one major challenge businesses face is how to filter through the noise and identify where their ideal customers exist. Get insight and practical steps from industry players and captains of industries. Hear success stories to help you make informed decisions as you scale your business in Nigeria. Watch Business Insights at this time on PlusTvAfrica.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. From the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
Contrary to popular belief, Corona is not a hoax. The virus is real. Be responsible. Wear a mask. Wash your hands with soap and water and avoid crowded places. Maintain physical distancing. Be responsible. Together, we can overcome the pandemic.
Increase the reach of your events or business services. To advertise on Plus TV Africa, please call 0906 000 5719 or 0909 040 8408, or send an email to marketing@plustvafrica.com. Plus TV Africa. Big stories live here.
Welcome back to The Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. First major conversation for today. The Economist put out a report over the weekend, which, well, I think sometime last week actually, which was very, very shocking with some of the quotes and statements that were made in that report. And I'll share with you some of them. It says, when violence erupts, the government does nothing or cracks heads amongst indiscriminately. Nigeria's army is mighty on paper, but many of its soldiers are ghosts who exist only on the payroll, and much of its equipment is stolen and sold to insurgents. That's one of the things that was a part of the quotes from the write-up by The Economist that got a lot of Nigerians talking. It also says the army is also stretched thin, having been deployed to all of Nigeria's states. The police are understaffed, demoralized, and poorly trained. Many supplement their low pay by robbing the public, and they have, by robbing the public, they have sworn to protect. Another very, very shocking statement on that report. It says money could have come from cutting wasteful spending by the armed forces on fighter jets, which are not of much use for guarding schools. Just examples of some of the things that were made, statements that were made in that report. And I hope that we'll also get to share a little bit more of them with you as we go on with this conversation. This morning, we're speaking with a security expert, Kabir Adamu. Good morning. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Adamu.
Good morning, sorry.
Okay. Of course, the Army has responded to the Economist report, and of course, I would always love to share. It says it's one of those deliberate falsehoods and noxious narratives orchestrated by a network of detractors and a coven of dark forces working hard to adorn the Nigerian Army in an unfitting garb of infamy. It basically also said that the Economist is seemingly sponsored to defame President Muhammadu Buhari. We'll get to the response by the Nigerian Army in a bit, but I want you to start with talking about your analysis of the Economist report.
Okay, thank you. It's a report that it's coming at a time when, unfortunately, the Nigerian military is challenged. Just like the report indicated, it is deployed increasingly actually in internal security matters, when frankly that is not its primary responsibility. But remarkably, the military has, for some reasons best known to it, taken up that responsibility. And in fact, a lot of people in Nigeria see the military as perhaps the only institution, that fabric that has held the country together as a result of these overwhelming challenges. In other words, there is a perception that if the military had not come in to in an attempt to address these internal security challenges, perhaps this fabric of the country would have collapsed by now, because those institutions that have the responsibility for addressing those internal security challenges have not been able to so far. Now, the report did mention the police too as one of the institutions, and of course it also talked about the inadequacies within the policing system. So yes, a lot of what the report said is reflective of the current situation in Nigeria. However, there were, I would say, missing gaps. Efforts that have been made by this administration and previous administration to improve the circumstances within the military and the police were not mentioned by that report. And I think the ideals of journalism places that responsibility that when you are doing such a report, when you are especially highlighting such inadequacies, deficiencies, you should also highlight some of the positive. And I'll quickly mention some of the effort by both this government and previous government to improve the military institutions. One of them is reforms aimed at improving human rights and rules of engagement between these institutions and the public. So we know, for instance, the military has received extensive training, both internally and with foreign partners, in an attempt to improve this human rights record as well as the rules of engagement. We also know that some structural changes have occurred within these institutions. So they've created departments for interaction between the military and those civil security departments. So you have a civil military coordination unit at the moment within the military. You also have instances where infractions by these military officers have been addressed by the military institution. Corruption is an example. We know of a case where a soldier was arrested in Borno State for raping a minor, and that soldier has been sentenced. We also know of several other cases where several military officers have been court-martialed. So those efforts have been made, and I think it would have been very fair for that report to acknowledge and take note of those efforts, despite the deficiencies it highlighted.
Okay, so let's also still stay with the deficiencies that's been put out, in the particular report. Now, the question would be, with all of the efforts, like you have rightly mentioned, that have been the reforms and the training put out, and also with the fact that, yes, we have seen the purchase of Tucano jets, we've also seen that again in the proposed 2022 budget, the defense is also going to take a lion's share of 1.4 trillion naira. We're looking at about 7% 10% or thereabout. How come we still have bandits, Boko Haram, and all of this, you know, on the increase? It feels like there's no match. There seems to be a mismatch with, you know, the funds, all of the efforts put together with, you know, tackling of the insurgents.
So the reality is that I think as a country, we need to differentiate between defense and security. I think as a result of our military legacy, a lot of Nigerians see defense as security, when in reality, defense is a component of security. And I'll quickly explain what I mean. If we have a challenge, like we do have in terrorism, in banditry, and name them, several other challenges, what we do is we deploy personnel with guns, and we think by deploying them, they will be able to address those challenges. No, security encompasses more than that. Security is the whole gamut of protection that requires both this physical, forceful deployment, as well as the soft component that would address especially the root causes of those challenges. So yes, we're spending money on purchase of hardware, but are we addressing those root causes of insecurity rather? Unemployment as an example, and I'm happy yesterday the NLC and I think another labor union highlighted this topic. No matter how we attempt to address insecurity, if we do not tackle unemployment and poverty, then unfortunately it will be very difficult. Even if we buy 100 Super Tucanos, 100 helicopter gunboats, and we employ even 2 million security personnel, if we do not address those root causes, then unfortunately the situation will continue. The other point is corruption. How much of this 2.4 trillion rather would be dedicated to the actual issues that were highlighted in the budget? What percentage of that would actually go to corrupt hands? You are living witness to the fact that there was a time when a technocrat in this country suggested that for every 10 kobo budgeted, 8 kobo of that 10 goes to corrupt pockets. So it appears maybe only 20% of that money is actually going to what it was meant for. Now, if that's the case, it means unfortunately we're pouring water into a basket. And for us to see the effect of this 2.4 billion, we will have to block the leakages through which this money is going. And to do that, we need to introduce and strengthen the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms within the entire security architecture that this 2.4 trillion will be going to. If we don't do that, then unfortunately it would be a waste. These monies will be unfortunately not be deployed for those right direction. The other element is also the civilian oversight over these departments in government. The National Assembly, as an example, under our current democratic disposition, has that responsibility for oversight over the military. So as an example, I'm hoping that this report by The Economist will serve as a basis for these relevant committees within the National Assembly to oversight and ask critical questions regarding some of the allegations in that report. Now, those are the various ways with which those institutions can live up. I can tell you, unfortunately, that the capacity and capability for that oversight at the moment is not adequate. It can be improved upon. Not too long ago, you saw what happened in the US when there was a bombing in Afghanistan during the evacuation of citizens, and then they killed citizens. You saw how the Congress immediately set up a committee, and of course the matter has been decided that the bombing was wrong, and I think compensation is being discussed. So that kind of oversight also reduces these types of deficiencies and inadequacies within those military, and it reduces the possibility of those leakages I talked about. 2.4 trillion will be a waste if we do not strengthen these two things that I mentioned, unfortunately.
Well, Mr. Adamo, I'm sure you also know that we don't have that level of oversight, with our National Assembly. That immediately puts to effect certain decisions. We would have committees set up that a lot of times don't really lead to anywhere. But I want to take you back. From what you've said, the Economist report isn't wrong. It's mostly correct. The only challenge is that they didn't include some of the gains that the Nigerian government has also achieved, with its military. And one of the things that you mentioned is corruption, which later on you've also mentioned corruption as a major challenge. Even if you initially said that corruption, is one of the things that they had also tried to fight, with, a soldier who was court-martialed for defiling a minor. But the Economist is pointing out corruption, and I believe at the topmost level, and the fraud that exists with the amount of money and billions of naira that are budgeted and are spent, that don't seem to be achieving much. And so I want you to speak once again on corruption and how much of a damage it is causing to the fight against insurgency and insecurity.
A lot. There is a direct correlation between corruption and the deficiency of equipment and the morale of soldiers, both at the battlefront and in other spheres, the theater of operation by the military. So I'll quickly explain what I mean. Equipment is usually bought as a function of the requirement. So when you buy fighter jets, you are hoping that those fighter jets will be used for specific purposes. But then what are the challenges that you have for which you went out to buy those fighter jets? There has been this argument as an example that perhaps instead of fighter jets, because of the nature of both terrorism and insurgency and banditry that we have in the country, what would have been relevant for us was helicopter gunships or other types of assets that have the possibility for deployment in this type of internal issues of insurrection. Jets, unfortunately, don't have the capability for close-range operations, but yet that's what we went to buy. Now, did we buy because we anticipated another type of security challenge, or what stopped us, for instance, for buying both the jets and then these types of helicopter gunships? Currently, we have the Super Tucanos, which are also very good for this type of close-range and idle, operations. Internally, like what we have. Now, the other element that is also important, like I said, there's a direct correlation. Nigeria is one of the few countries that I know in the world where you have an ongoing war, and I know this is debatable, but I am of the opinion that we do have a war ongoing in several fronts in Nigeria. In all the definitions of a war, both the UN and others, I think what we have in Nigeria is qualified as that. But yet our soldiers still move in soft-skin vehicles. Yet our soldiers most times don't have the protective gear that they should have when they are in the battlefront. Most of them, frankly, even where they have the balaclava cannot even stop the types of ammunition that is being shot, at them. And then one of the most ridiculous things, and I'm quoting the chair of the Senate Committee on the Army, Ali Ndumi, when he said he's been to the war front and he's seen our soldiers without ammunition. Now, I haven't seen that. What I've seen is them having the AK-47 with one magazine. Now, that one magazine has 30 bullets around in it. Meanwhile, the enemy that is coming to attack them most times would have two magazines tied together with 60 rounds of ammunition, and would also have several other cartridges for immediate deployment, even when those 60 finish. He would also have beyond this AK-47. And so all of these are ramifications of the corruption, unfortunately, because corruption is not just financial, it's also systemic. We can also talk about the conflict of interest, where, for instance, when you are issued procurement, something as basic as feeding, instead of running a system that is transparent, you issue it to your wife or to your girlfriend, or if you are a woman, to your boyfriend or to your husband or someone associated with your husband. And at the end of the day, that person does not supply the food that he or she is supposed to supply to the soldier in the war front. What kind of systems are in place to check that and prevent it? All of these, unfortunately, are happening within these institutions that I mentioned. But let's not forget that these institutions are not alien to the Nigerian society. Whatever is happening in Nigerian society is most likely to be happening within them. So let's not isolate them. The kind of reforms that this administration in particular has done, I think, has been far-reaching. Currently there are trials that are ongoing. Some of them have been concluded regarding high-ranking officers that have been found, guilty or being suspected of engaging in corruption. You recall the general that was moving money from Sokoto, and those that were moving the money for him were arrested. That trial, if I'm right, is either concluded or is still ongoing. A former national security advisor is still being tried for several infractions to our procurement rules. So there have been attempts like that. But then my point, and I think we both agree to that, is that more needs to be done. It's not by being reactive. We need to be proactive by putting in place M&E, monitoring and evaluation, as well as audit functions within the institution. The argument would be, no, you cannot because they are security agencies. But other countries have done it. You can institute an internal system for monitoring and evaluation that would be oversighted by the National Assembly, so that there is transparency in all of these processes, starting from recruitment down to even the operations in the field. Procurement is one gray area. I've talked about it in the past, and I know that is one area that increasingly we're seeing corruption from within those institutions. So monitoring and evaluation, auditing functions would hopefully reduce this corruption.
Okay, let's also look at another issue, that has been mentioned over time, that some quarters have, described the Nigerian military as constantly losing professionalism. The constant interference of military in civil affairs. We already know that the police is actually created for the purpose of maintaining peace, law and order in a civil society. So how would you describe the particular act and what can be done?
So it's a two-way thing. The military doesn't just wake up and, interfere. They are usually directed to interfere, usually by a presidential pronouncement, something coming from the presidency. It could be from the president himself or from any of his aides that has the responsibility for that. Now, in other countries, what happens is that the National Assembly would have some say in that type of deployment. There should be, most times, there is a criteria, and I know the Constitution provides for that sort of conditions before the military is deployed. But because of our military era, it's become a norm. And I can tell you, I've been in circumstances where even governors have kind of supported the deployment of military in their state. There are certain instances where the federal government would want to redeploy the military from certain states, perhaps for expediency or because of certain requirements that have arisen. But governors would not only object to it, but they will come to Abuja, insist, through discussions with several high-ranking individuals, including the president sometimes, and say, do not deploy those people out of our state. If you do, these are the consequences. So again, that political climate as a result of the legacy of our military past has created this environment where the military is deployed. The second point that I would like to emphasize, which the report by economists has also spoken about, is the inadequacies within the police itself. Now, the police, unfortunately, has found itself in a situation, some of it as a result of its own failures, others as a result of failure by past governments and to an extent even the current government. Funding is an example. Inability to correct some of the structural deficiencies within the police has made the police ineffective and incapable of addressing those challenges. And so the military has stepped in to cover that gap. But it's a catch-22 situation, and the continued deployment of the military means the police will never be, in that position where it will take up its responsibility. So that I am an advocate, and I know there's a lot of people who are also advocating that we need to draw a line at some point and redeploy the military and to ask the police to take over its responsibility. But to do that, it means the police would have to be strengthened. And I am happy to say this administration, the Buhari administration, has done a lot in an attempt to strengthen the police. The Police Act that has been passed not too long ago, I think it was in 2019. Then, of course, we've also seen the Police Trust Fund, which would have responsibility for improving training, welfare, and equipment within the police. And then we've also seen recently, especially after the EndSARS the reform process that has been instituted by the police. So we're hoping that all of these things would increase the capacity of the police to take over from the military. But there has to be a conscious effort. And like I said, I think we need to draw a line and say, okay, from 2022 or 2023, this is the procedure for deploying the military. And until then, the police must take over the leadership for internal security deployment. But let's not forget, it's not just the responsibility of the police. There are about at least 18 to 19 departments that have responsibility for civil security matters. And each of these departments will have to be strengthened. I'll quickly, as an example, mention the customs and immigration. Border security is their responsibility. And most of the weapons that we have in the country are coming in from across the border. So if those departments are not strengthened, then it means no matter how we attempt to strengthen the police, there will still be those gaps. So it's not just looking at one institution. We have to look at the entire security architecture as a whole and strengthen the capacity and capabilities of all the organizations that have responsibility for different.
Sounds really, interesting, your perspective. But I want us to now talk about the response from the army. You agree somehow, some way, to a large extent, with the economists and what they've stated. It even got to, as Detia is saying, that the ammunition and some of the arms, are stolen and sold to the insurgents. But I want you to look at the response from the army that basically used many words from the dictionary to say that the Economist is sponsored to defame President Muhammadu Buhari. Do you see that as an army that understands the gravity of these accusations and knows what needs to be done in order for it to actually win the war against insurgency? And also, when an army sees these things and interprets it as efforts to defame the president, what does that say to you?
I would say an egregious nature of the allegation. And I think the response should have been a bit more diplomatic with regards to, for instance, yes, you can discredit the conclusion. And like I said, point out the fact that the economists did not take into consideration the huge reforms and the steps that have been taken. But also, shouldn't that be an opportunity for the army to point out these things instead of simply saying that this is meant to defame the president? And why is that always smear the person of the president, as it were? But let's remember that the institution of the president is there because of Nigeria. So that institution is not over and above Nigeria. What has happened is now a well-respected publication actually dragging the name of our country, Nigeria, to the mud. Now, whether it is correct or not, the responsibility is on the whole institution of government, not just the military, to point out whether that is correct. I would have expected, as an example, given the fact that the Economist is an international organization, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would have had an input in the response by the military. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is better suited to speak that language of diplomacy and speak to the Committee of Nations in a manner that they will understand. That response, unfortunately, I think is short on diplomacy. It is very short in terms of responding to the core issues that were raised by the economies. And I'm hoping that there will be a follow-up response that would be more diplomatic, that would address those core issues, and also, more importantly, put the responsibility on the economist to make sure that it corrects some of the misconceptions that it has created by that report. What we've ended up doing is confirming, or rather what the military's response has ended up doing is confirming their allegation that as an institution, it is not accountable to the civilian population by simply condemning that publication without necessarily providing an alternative narrative. I'm not an expert in communication, but I know that one of the things you are hoping to do when you are responding is to provide an alternative narrative. You don't just discredit, but provide the alternative narrative so that drives the conversation And I think most Nigerian departments of government, unfortunately, do not realize this. All we hear, like you rightly said, is the defensive position, but provide the alternative narrative so that you discredit what was said and you steal, as it were, the platform from wherever it is trying to smear you.
All right. Just seeing that they also have a podcast on The Economist titled State of Emergency Nigeria. I'm going to definitely take a listen to that. Kabir Adamu, thank you very much for your time this morning. Have a very beautiful Monday ahead.
We appreciate it.
And thank you, and have a good week ahead too.
You too. All right, stay with us. Dele Farotimi joins us next, of course, to discuss State of the Nation. And I'm sure that some of these things that we've just spoken about will come up in this conversation coming up next.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. On the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment. There's another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Welcome to your favorite program, The Moment of Truth, brought to you by the Citadel Global Community Church. Our God is a God of salvation, far above all principality and power and might and dominion, that regardless of what happens in this season, you will escape. Say to your neighbor, there is no peace for the wicked. The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is a man's precious possession. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might.
Moment of Truth with Pastor Tunde Bakare. Sundays, 7 p.m. on Plus TV Africa.
Nigeria, by extension, Africa, is faced with a lot of challenges. The growing youth population with little engagement, that is a ticking time bomb. We are a blessed people with diverse culture and highly cerebral minds who have a lot to say. And yes, we are talking. It is important we drive the right conversation that informs, inspires, influences thoughts and action. We know you have a lot to say, and we are here to hear you.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
The suspect equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect them.
If you no talk, then go beat you.
Now 2,500 they pay.
Welcome back to The Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. Now, our second conversation would be about the state of the nation. We're talking about Nigeria. Now, we're also going to be looking at the issue of kidnapping, the issue of kidnapping terrorist activities in the northern part of Nigeria, IPOP in the southeastern part of Nigeria, and the issue of governance in the Federal Capital Territory. And we do have a guest with us who's going to be joining us via Zoom, Mr. Daly. It's good to have you join us this morning, Mr. Daly.
For having me. Good to see you.
All right, so let's start off with generally, how would you describe, the state of the nation? Looking at the fact that when the president got into power, President Muhammadu Buhari, in 2015, he had promised Nigeria that, security would be a thing of the past. And here we are, we're still talking about the issue of kidnapping, banditry, amongst others, in different parts of the country.
Well, I believe there were two principal campaign promises made by General Buhari leading to the 2015 elections. The first was the promise of security, and he leveraged a lot on his experience as a general. The second, of course, was the much touted anti-corruption battle, which has today devolved into a farce. But when you ask the question about security, let's understand something. The primary duty of the state is the protection of the life and properties of the citizens. But that is the beginning of the Nigerian conundrum. The primary duty of the Nigerian state appears to be the security of the state, the preservation of the state, the discountment of the right of those whom it calls citizens, and their abandonment to every element that might prey on them. Nigeria today, security-wise, is worse than where it was in 2015. In 2015, insecurity in Nigeria, at least as it related to insurgency or terrorism, was largely confined to the Northeast. Today, the Northwest, including the president's own state, is a place where people don't sleep with both eyes shut anymore. So today, in the Northwest, in the Northeast, in the North Central, these people are not terrorists, but the likes of Sunday Igboho, Nnamdi Kanu, Yele Sowore are terrorists. These are the questions we need to ask ourselves when we begin to talk about insecurity. It's a function of what the state considers important. The amount of policemen that were at Lekki toll gate just on the anniversary of the first anniversary of the NSAS thing, they would have been sufficient to perhaps police the trail line. But the rail line was not as important as ensuring that people do not speak as citizens. So it's a function of what the Nigerian state considers terrorism, what it considers important, and what it's discounting as. So where the Nigerian state believes terrorists are, it is dealing with terrorism there. That's why you have 34,000 policemen deployed to Anambra for an election. But you don't have 34,000 policemen deployed around Kaduna to provide security, even though people are being killed and kidnapped daily. So it's a function of national priority. It's not a function of, it's not about manpower. I think it was Commodore Lawumi when he was speaking on Arise. He made it abundantly clear. It's a function of what the state considers important to it at any point in time. The Nigerian state is more focused on silencing the voices of those who demand citizenship. It is not interested in chasing after, oh, I forget, they are not terrorists, they are bandits. Oh, vandals too. They can be vandals sometimes, but they are anything but terrorists. So it's a function of the priority of General Buhari. Those who we believe to be terrorists, he even goes as far as Kenya to kidnap them to come and face trial. One is being chased around in Benin. So it's a function of the priorities of the president. And it's not just the president. There is a House of Assembly. There is a Senate. There are governors. We have people all over Nigeria, men who believe themselves to be men and women of good conscience, why aren't they talking? Why is it left to those who are considered the lunatic fringe to point out the obvious insanity of labeling pro-democracy, let's even say self-determination agitators? This is a constitutional right. I have every right, if I believe Nigeria is not working for me, to say so and advocate for my own enclave, however I care to define it, as long as I am speaking so within the boundaries of civility. But a national problem found on a lack of justice. Take away all the things that legitimizes IPOB's struggles, and you diffuse the situation. But there has been no interest shown, none whatsoever, in finding any reconciliation. If anything, you're pushing people to extremes, almost as if people are being asked to go to war. God forbid that we find ourselves in that kind of situation, but the reality is, yes, might forbid, but we're already in one. Northeast, northwest, north central, south. The Nigerian state pays rent to take oil in the south. Southwest, if they are not, I can't go to Ibadan feeling comfortable. I have to worry about being kidnapped on the road. For what? And yet there is a government. In the most basic of the duties of a state, the Nigerian state has failed. And if we are rating precedents in terms of security, in my lifetime, Nigeria has never had it this bad. Never. I drove, in my youth, I would drive Lagos Ibadan Expressway, and I'm not Professor Shoyinka, for heaven's sake. He used to tell us how he has books and poems where he described riding all the way to Kaduna in the middle of the night, driving into the north. We can't even live that life again. My children can't have that. I used to tell my kids how I used to drive on Lagos Ibadan Expressway 1 hour from end to end. My children can't have that. Look.
Well, Mr. to me, apologies, Mercy.
Just before I let you, come through, should the president be responsible for, security across the 36 states of the Federation, including the FCT?
Let's be clear about something. We lie too much to ourselves in Nigeria. The fraudulent constitution called Decree 24 places every security apparatus under the control of whoever the current occupant of that demonic place called Aso Rock. I have no apologies for saying that. They go in there, everybody appears to lose their brains. He is the sole person responsible. It is only in Nigeria that you can actually give reality to that American maxim. The buck stops on this desk. The buck stops on General Buhari's desk. He's the sole person who can command the army, he can command he's the only person, he's the commander-in-chief. It is only in Nigeria that vile statement finds full expression. If this gerontocrat does not get up to tell them to do this, they won't do it. However much a state commissioner of police might have been rendered complicit by participation in the local crimes, the reality is that at the end of the day, the ultimate decision as to deployment and operation comes directly from the presidency. We can blame these governors, and yes, they deserve to be blamed because many of them are inept and corrupt. But the reality is that the powers of deployment, either for troops or anything related to the armed forces and the police, is directly at the desk of General Buhari or whoever occupies that office at any point in time. No, we are not a federation. This question itself, even it exposes the lies of of what we call federalism in Nigeria. Please, let me ask you, in what other federal entity in the world do you find states incapable of running their own police force? Nowhere else. And the only place it is permitted in Nigeria, permitted under the reign of impunity, are in those states busy enacting laws that are patently treasonous. And then you are raising his bad forces to be breaking beer bottle, and you are happy to share the proceeds of VAT from the same beer. Come on. So at the end of the day, this is not a federation. Let's forget all that lie about true federalism. If it is right, why? If it is the truth, why are you qualifying it with true federalism? There is no federalism in Nigeria. We have a unitary command system. And I'm borrowing the word unitary advisedly because what we have, we insult the British who typifies unitary. Because in unitary Britain, you have devolution of powers to all the regions. The London Metropolitan Police is distinct from those who are in Greater Manchester. Each person takes their operational command from the local authorities. But look at us in Nigeria. Sanwo-Olu cannot call Mosu unless it's something that is between them. He can't. He doesn't have such powers. So when we call it federalism, it's not a federation. This is one of the stupid. We built everything on lies. Please,
Mr. Farotimi.
Buhari and Buhari alone is responsible for the security of Nigeria. He is the commander-in-chief. Chief.
Dele Farotimi, I'm sure there's a lot of people who may not necessarily agree with you. We've seen a lot of statements from Lai Mohammed, from Femi Adesina, and the likes, who say that there's a lot of gains that that are on record with the current administration, and if done well, they might even go as well as saying that Nigerians might be begging for a man like Buhari, a person like President Buhari, come 2023. But I want you to talk about moving forward. Earlier on the program this morning, I was asking about what we really have achieved in the last 6 years. But what must we do as a nation if we need to move forward? Elections are coming in 2023. It's scary for a couple of people.
See, one of the first things we need, you cannot say your economy is better today than it was 6 years ago. I'm not suggesting that it would have been El Dorado if it had been a continuation of the reign of the PDP. They were as inept and as incompetent as the current lot. And if you really think about it, they're one and the same. It's the same people who were in PDP 7 years ago that are largely in the APC today. But the reality on the ground is that it would appear as if in the last 6 years, somebody has been on a deliberate mission to destroy Nigeria. Is economic based on, as I said to you, that every illusion that anyone might have ever had about Nigeria, like Mohammed might have to say, or Femi Adesina, those ones, they're talking 2023 elections. They're deploying 34,000 policemen in somebody's gatehouse account. But when you really do import policemen from China, there can't be elections in this situation. We should be talking about fundamental restructuring of Nigeria. So